settled, I'd love to get going on tonight's webinar. Hello, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's wonderful to have you here on Quad Education's webinar, Understanding the Common Application. Before we get started, I do have a few housekeeping rules, so to speak. First and foremost, this webinar is recorded, so you will receive a copy of this recording in your email within the next couple of days. We're looking at running it for about 45 minutes, 30 minutes of content, and just giving you as much education as possible on the common application, as well as a 15-minute question and answer period. And what that really looks like is your opportunity to speak, so to say, with Varna and Pamela and get all those questions that you have answered. Whether you're a parent or a student, we definitely want to hear from you. So we encourage you to use the chat feature and drop us a question. We'll make sure that we get to them, as many of them as possible. So with that being said, I'm excited to share a little bit about who we are and what we offer. You may not know us, or you may have been to a few of our webinars or even chatted with some of our experts. So Quad Education is a globally recognized college admissions consulting firm with the largest team of admissions counselors in the world. With a 98% success rate, our students are 11 times more likely to get accepted at their top choice colleges. We assist students from 6th grade to undergraduate transfer candidates in applying to their dream schools. We are firm believers in starting the college application process as early as possible. For middle schoolers and early high schoolers, we offer college candidacy and profile development. This process focuses on building each student's resume to highlight their strengths. We want the candidate to stand out. So we will work with your student to identify clubs and leadership positions, find extracurricular activities, and volunteer opportunities, as well as assist in creating next year's class schedule. Our college development program extends outside of the classroom and the regular school year. Since schools are looking for more than just academics these days, our counselors are always help plan summer activities. This can include summer courses, internships, shadowing, research opportunities, and giving back to the community through encouraging students to create service projects. Once we've helped shape an outstanding candidate, we extend our support to shaping the perfect application. We're here to help with comprehensive application support, from picking the right major to building a balanced list of schools, activities list creation, obtaining letters of recommendation, interview preparation, and applying scholarships. Our admissions counselors are also essay writing experts who will brainstorm, outline, and edit your supplemental essays and personal statements until they are perfect. These essays serve as a platform to showcase the best aspects of our students, drawing connections between their individual life journeys and the overarching themes of each school they apply to. Whether it's your main application or those extra essays for scholarships, we've got your back with unlimited edits. Overall, our goal is to build the perfect candidate and application. We utilize every tool in our skill set to ensure the products we create with our students, the products that we create with students stand out from the rest of the pack. If you're interested in learning more about us and our packages, we offer personalized free consultations via video, phone, or email, ensuring individualized support. Our admissions counselors are always ready and willing to help you through the process, so you don't have to navigate it alone, no matter where you are in the college application process. With that being said, I'd love to pass it over to a wonderful panelist to introduce themselves tonight.
Hi, everyone. Can y'all hear me okay? I think so. My name is Varna. I am one of the admissions counselors here at Quad Education. A little bit about myself. I went to the University of Michigan for undergrad, and then I went to Columbia University for my Master of Public Health. And now I'm a current third-year medical student in Chicago. So I've been through a lot of different application processes, and I've advised a lot of students both in STEM field as well as in the liberal arts as well. And I'm really committed to just helping students be able to tell their story and come across as well-rounded. And yeah, kind of everything about me.
Thanks, Vana. My name is Pam. I'm so excited to be speaking to all of you today. I am a former admissions officer at Harvard and Stanford. I went to Harvard as an undergrad and then went on to get my PhD in neuroscience at Stanford. I was a clinical faculty member in neuroscience and psychiatry. I did my postdoctoral work in anesthesia and pain management. I went to medical school there. And now I'm on this side of the fence, or this side of the table, working with students to help them craft their applications. So we're very excited today to be able to speak to you all about the Common Application.
So today we're going to basically cover what is the Common Application, right? Why is it important? And it's kind of going to be the main thing that you're using for the next few months if you're a senior and you're kind of on the application cycle. And we're going to talk through step by step how to fill out each section of the application. We know it can be kind of intimidating, so we're going to make that a lot easier for all of you tonight. And then we'll wrap up with the Q&A.
So the Common Application is a standardized platform that you'll be using to apply to just about every university out there. There are some notable exceptions, some schools that don't use the Common App, for example, MIT, Georgetown, the UCs, the University of California system, but even the University of Texas system has come on board, as well as many other schools that were not on it last year. So every year they add colleges to the list so that most colleges will be on the Common Application. So this helps you out a lot because you're going to put everything into one centralized place, and your recommenders and teachers are going to be uploading their recommendations into the same centralized portal. So the Common App is really crucial because it helps you to streamline your application process. So you can use one application for multiple schools, which is why there is a limit of 20 schools that you can apply to on the Common App. And it is very widely accepted, including some international universities. It saves you a ton of time and effort for having to sign up with multiple accounts and then having to work through multiple sets of requirements. Most schools will be on the Common App.
As Pam already mentioned, so it's super convenient to have everything in one place, and it prevents you from having to do a lot of copying and pasting and sending to a lot of different places and keeping track of everything in different places. You'll be able to keep track of everything in one place. And so by having the standards application process, that means that you're able to present the same information in a consistent way to every single school that you apply to. As we mentioned, you can apply up to 20 schools through the Common Application, which is more than enough. And you can, we'll get into this a little bit later on in the presentation, but you will also be including your activities, your transcripts, your test scores, all that stuff will be in this one place, and you don't have to worry about individually sending it to each school. It will just go out from that Common Application.
So the benefits are that aside from being really convenient, you're really consistent. So meaning what admissions officers like to see across the board are consistency. So it's very hard for us to evaluate multiple transcripts, multiple sets of different school requirements and the ways that teachers write. But as much as possible, the Common App standardizes the way that college admissions officers are looking at your file. So that same information in a very consistent format is helps us a lot in terms of evaluating files and the number of hours and time it would take to learn new systems. So that's why the Common App is really convenient.
And so kind of as we already mentioned, so it's a centralized tracking system, right? So you're able to keep track of all of your application in one place. You get all of your alerts about deadlines and updates also in one place. You just have to have the one portal, and also makes it easy for both parents and student to access all the information, keep track of everything. In terms of other benefits, you can have access to your supplemental questions that are specific to each institution. So essentially what will happen is once you add a school to your queue, there will also be an option for to fill out the supplemental questions, the supplemental essays, and that will also be sent out to that specific school right from there. And you can always submit additional documents electronically. So for example, if you have a supplement, like an art supplement or a research publication or something like that that you have attached to your application, you can upload that to your Common Application, and that will then also be attached to your application that then goes to that institution. So admissions officers can then also see any additional information that you want to include beyond your personal statement, your activities.
So the Common App starts with the personal information section. This is very important to us because it provides basic details like your name, your address, your phone number, your gender. Last year, they updated it beyond male and female, and you can put X and other designations as you wish, as well as your citizenship status. So that's really important for financial aid purposes down the line. It also asks for information about your family, so your siblings. They used to ask about where your siblings went to college, but they got rid of that. And your educational history, so meaning what schools you attend or what schools you have attended outside of, like meaning additional coursework. All of that gets put into the personal information section.
And so kind of like the important details here is you're going to put your full name, and that includes, exactly how it appears on your driver's license, your date of birth, all your contact information, and then family information that's still included is you'd list out your parental guardians, their occupations, their highest level of education, and then for your education history as well. If you attended multiple institutions growing up, you would include those in your education history section.
So in the education section, you'll put not only your current school, but any previous schools that you might have attended, your GPA, your class rank, if that's something that your school does, the classes you've taken, and then the grades you've received. You'll also need to put things, there's a separate testing section that covers the SAT, ACT, all your AP scores, if that's part of your curriculum. I would say here too that a lot of people don't know this, but when my students, I live in California, so it's quite common for students to dual enroll in community college. And they ask me, well, where should I include that? So that can go under the education section. There's a section for other colleges and universities that you can list. So any summer programs where you took classes that were full length, full credit bearing classes, that can go into this section as well.
Right. What I always recommend to the students I work with is to literally have your transcript printed out and make sure you're copying things over exactly as it appears in your transcript, even though you will be providing an official transcript that gets sent out from the school. When you're filling out all your academic details, it's really, really easy to, mix something up or, not match up the right columns, the right grades. So always make sure to quadruple check that, make sure you leave enough time in this step to double check everything that you're putting in. So like Pamela just mentioned, you're going to list your schools, anything that you've attended, any dual enrollment that you have, all the courses that you've taken, all the grades that you've received, and it'll be divided up by each year. And then you're going to include your GPA, class rank, if your school does that. And then the test scores you're going to add in manually as well. And you'll also be submitting those from the College Board, the official transcript of those test scores.
So you want to try to get your transcripts early. I know this is often out of your control because your school counselor will take care of this. But oftentimes your school counselor will have things for you to do, whether it's in Naviance or Maya Learning, before they're willing to send out the transcripts. So make sure that you're filling out the questionnaires that they're asking you for, populating your college list. So oftentimes, depending on your school and the software that they use, they're requiring all of that before they release the transcripts. And remember that most schools are going to be asked to be sent the mid-year report. So meaning in your senior year, if you're applying this year, counselors will have to send in a mid-year report to colleges. And then lastly, I know it sounds silly, but there are actually a lot of schools that sound extremely similar. I'll give you one I was looking up yesterday, University High School. There's a University High School in apparently many cities and in many states. So you want to make sure that the school information that you're entering is actually for your particular high school.
Absolutely. So now when it comes to the testing section, right? So this is where you're going to include all your standardized test scores, not just your SAT and ACT, but also any AP exams or IB exam scores that you've taken and received. And it's always super important to cross-check the requirements for each institution in terms of, what scores and what exams that they accept, and what APs or IBs, for example, that will translate to college credit, all that kind of stuff. Take a look on the school website on their admissions page. They'll have all that information there. And it's super important to pay attention to the submission time, right? So it's, as Pam already mentioned, always better to be early, right? So sending those transcripts early, sending the The AP exam scores, SAT scores, as soon as you have them is honestly the best way to go about it. Also, since a lot of that can be up to your guidance counselor, the way that your school does it, don't be afraid to follow up. This is, they're going to be working with so many different students. So definitely be on top of it and make sure that, you're checking your Common App every day to make sure and see whether or not the application is complete, because it has to be complete in order for it to be reviewed.
So the list of scores to include, I'm going to talk about this for 1 second. So schools like Yale, which have now required standardized testing, they're saying that you do not have to take an SAT or an ACT. You could also include IB, AP scores in lieu of. There are no subject tests anymore, so I think that's a mistake. But essentially, you can choose to not take the SAT or ACT, but then if you do that, they have a list of other tests that they're requiring and they want you to take. Also, in the testing section, I don't know what they're going to do this year because the Common App is going to go down and then it's going to come back live on August 1st, which is why we're doing this webinar right now. But in the years past, they've asked you, how many scores would you like to submit? So meaning if you've taken tests across multiple testing administrations, they're asking, do you want to include 2? Do you want to include 3? How many do you want to include? So some schools super score, others don't. Some schools super score across different test administrations, and some schools allow you to submit the highest testing from one sitting. So this is very confusing, and the more options we have, the more confusing it gets. But you want to pay attention to which school needs what, because this is new. So as of now, or as of this year, it's still a live issue in terms of who's requiring testing and who's not, and then the tests that they want. In years past, they did ask you, how many times have you taken the test? I don't know if that's coming back this year, but in the past, they did ask that.
Great points to keep in mind. So that's why we're always saying, always double check with the school admission site. They will very clearly state in on there what they're looking for and what they allow. So just some additional tips. So like, as I just mentioned, take a look at each college, their specific testing requirements, right, to make sure you submit the necessary scores. And then once you submit your scores, do your best to, if the deadline is, let's just say like October 14th, for example, for like early action. I always say be 2 weeks early, if not earlier, right? So if you can be 2 weeks early, that's great. Always submit things earlier, because that way also if something comes up where maybe it's like taking a little bit more time or there's a delay or whatever, you still have enough time to make it by the deadline. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Hopping back in here. Perfect. I'm back in here. I just want to take a moment to quickly check in to see if there's any questions thus far. Oh, awesome. Okay, so we see a question. It says, if a student took both SAT and ACT, should they submit both or just the best one? I'll open this up to either one of you.
The best one. We don't require both. We would love to see you should really be putting your best foot forward. So choose the one where you scored the highest. And there are a lot of like SAT, ACT conversion tables out there that you can use as well for that.
Yeah, I was just going to second that. If you took the ACT, just, I would use the conversion score to see if it's higher than your SAT score if you've taken both. But both are like widely accepted now. So I would just choose whichever one is the higher score. Way back in the day, I feel like when I was applying, like, SAT was kind of more of the norm. And so people would be like, oh, like maybe you should submit the SAT and ACT. I think now we're kind of well past that. I would just submit your highest score.
And I'd love to throw in that we actually, and I can put it in the chat for everyone, we have converters on our website that allow you to go from ACT to SAT or SAT to ACT, excuse me. We have a ton more questions coming in, which is fantastic. I just want to we'll get to those for sure. We have a question that often or not comes up during our one-on-one consultations. And that question is, how many schools can I apply with in the Common App? Is there a maximum amount of schools that students are allowed to apply in? It's a question we often get.
20. Sorry, I mentioned that earlier.
Awesome. Okay. In the meantime, I just want to draw everyone's attention to the screen. We're offering, just as a little bit of a thank you for sticking with us thus far, and for being here tonight, we're offering a 10% off discount. So it's quad 10% off. It's 10% off your entire package using that code. So if you want to pull out your phones, scan that QR code, it actually takes you to a consultation page where you get to learn a little bit more about us, what we do, and potentially book your own one-on-one with one of our experts. As well, we love our resources in here. I wanted to draw everyone's attention to an awesome resource called Completing the Common Application 7 Steps. It's a cheat sheet. You'll also receive this in your inbox. We highly encourage you to do a quick Google search. It'll be the first one that comes up, and download it. Definitely download it and use it as a guide throughout your application process. Ladies, I will bring it back to you.
Okay, so the activities section is kind of like your resume. So this is where you get to tell me all about your time outside of your classwork. So how you choose to spend your time outside the classroom. You get up to 10 activities. It is not essential to fill out all 10. Students get very worried about that. So you can put things like sports, clubs, school involvement, school leadership, jobs, volunteer work, family responsibilities. So don't forget that if you're spending time looking after an elderly family member or a younger family member, or you're the sibling who always has to look after all of your other siblings. My sister did that when I was growing up, then that gets listed or can get listed as part of the time that you're spending. So if, for example, your parents don't come home too late and you're often cooking dinner for your siblings, that's also something that counts. So it's not just formal clubs that can go in here. We want to see how you choose to spend your time and how you value the things that you choose outside of the classroom. So when I look at an activity section, I always say to students, make sure that it's rank ordered from the most important to the least. But in the first 3 or 4 activities, I should really get a good sense of who you are. And if I don't, then I would say the burden's on you, the applicant, to make sure that you're putting together a cohesive activities list. So meaning you're not just randomly dropping things in there. You want to think really carefully about how the story that you're trying to tell through the ways that you spend your time outside of the classroom and how they align with your interests.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree with that. Also, just to kind of address one of the questions, we'll get to all the questions, but one of the ones that kind of relates to this activities thing someone asked about, is it necessary to have a job in high school, or do colleges want to see how you're spending your time outside class? It's not that it's necessary to have a job specifically. Kind of what I'm going to get into in this slide here, really focus on leadership, focus on things that you made a significant contribution to. And as Pam mentioned, kind of organizing that based on your most impactful, most meaningful experience to your least is how we always recommend framing it. There isn't any requirement necessarily to have a job per se, but it's more so about, when you take a look at all of your activities, you do want to have a well-rounded application, right? That's kind of what we're always going for. So kind of having a little bit, not to say a little bit in everything, but really showing substantial amount of work in the things that you're doing. So, that's what we always encourage, having longitudinal experiences, things that you did, for multiple years, for example, and even things that, are maybe not necessarily you're applying into a STEM program, but maybe you do art on the side, or you're a dancer on the side. Those are things that make you who you are and are important to your character and to the admissions person to get a better idea of who you are and how you spend your time outside of school. So definitely include those things. It doesn't have to be a job, or it doesn't have to be a research position, or whatever it may be. It's more so how does it fit into your story? And you want to use your activities as an opportunity to build upon the other things that you were involved in that you might not be able to fit into a personal statement that has, a word count limit to it, right? Your activity section is a great opportunity for you to use those extra words, if that makes sense. And even that has a word count to it too, but use those extra words to tell more about your story and what you accomplished while you're in high school. So really focusing on leadership, super important. Being concise, right? So oftentimes when I'm working with students, I'm always how do you, in a short amount of words, how can you say something impactful about this experience? What was the most meaningful thing that you took away from this experience? And so really highlighting, for example, here, right, this person was an editor-in-chief, and they talk about how they managed a team, right? Those are things that, from an admissions perspective, we're like, okay, so this is someone that like took initiative, had to maybe run meetings or, delegate tasks, hold other people accountable on the team to accomplish this goal of producing the school newspaper. And so those are, using an adjective like managed or directed or executed, like those are things that are really tell a lot about like, okay, this person took initiative or this person, drove something within the school newspaper, for example.
So before I get into the writing section, which is my favorite part of the entire application, I would say a couple things about the job. So I saw that question too. If you need to work to contribute to your family budget, then absolutely get a job. I forgot to mention that. So a lot of times when students have to work to help with family expenses, they don't think that that counts as an extracurricular, but it absolutely counts. And that would be really important for us to know. And then the second thing I would say about the activity section, and now of course I've forgotten it. I was like, oh, I have to remember. Oh, you don't have to write in complete sentences. People don't often know this. You don't have to write, I was the managing editor or the editor-in-chief, and I helped overlook, So they think that you can write in kind of phrases instead of complete sentences because you only get 150 characters, not words. My students think that they get 150 words. I was like, no, it's like a tweet. So when you're tweeting something, right, you want to think what's important here, because you're not going to say hashtag I did this, right? You're going to talk about what are the most important accomplishments. Anyway, now onto the writing section. So the writing section is my favorite because it is your one chance in the application to have your voice. So if you were to sit down with me, your admissions officer, and have a conversation with me, what is it that you would like me to know about you? And this is really the only place where you get to talk about things that you've done in your voice. Every other aspect of the application, your letters of recommendation, your counsel letters, they're all done by people writing about you. But in your writing, this is the one place where you can really, let your personality shine and let me know what's really important to you.
Absolutely. This is also my favorite part of the application, my favorite part to work on with students. It's always really fun and exciting to see how you kind of bring out people's personal stories, right? And so what's really, really important is, as Pam already mentioned, you only get 650 words to do this, right? So it's really important to kind of cut to the chase, right? I know if in a perfect world we were able to write a whole story about everything that we did and what it meant to us and that kind of thing, but I always say when you reflect on the last, I guess, would be almost 3 years at that point, right, when you're sitting down to write this, what were some of the most impactful experiences that you had that then kind of drove your vision for what you want to accomplish in college, or what career you want to pursue, or why you want to go to college even, right? Like, why do you need to go to college to accomplish what you want to? And more importantly, it's really important to take that time to be introspective and reflect on, okay, if I had to pick just like 2 experiences that I did, once you write out all of your activities, you need to pick out 2 experiences that you want to elaborate more on and also tell a story with. What would those be? And that's what you can use your 650 words to kind of capture those moments, right? And then in terms of additional information, this is also a separate section where you can include any extra information that you feel might be relevant to your application that was not covered in other sections. For example, especially during the peak of COVID, there was a lot of people going through different personal challenges, family challenges, personal life challenges, things like that, that maybe a couple of things, right? It can either change your educational experience, it can change your performance, academic performance, things like that you can include in this section of, hey, this is what, this is something that I was going through at that time, and here's how it impacted my life and my application. And so that's where you can use that additional information. You do not have to fill this section out, though. It's optional.
Those are all excellent tips from Vanna. So I would say a lot of my seniors are currently writing, and they often wonder, why are we starting so early? Because the deadline's not until November 1 or January 1. And I would say that's because you want to let your writing breathe. I don't know about you guys, but personally, when I'm writing, I think that whatever I've written right before the deadline sounds amazing. And then I go back and I reread it later on and it's like, oh my gosh, this is so not coherent. But at the time when I was submitting it right before the deadline, it made a lot of sense in my head. And in my head, the story read really coherently. But then if I go back and review it, it doesn't. So that's why we ask students to start early and revise the essay multiple times. That means that they're picking and choosing between multiple topics. We're delving deep into them, seeing which ones work. We thought one worked, but then when we got to the crux of the conflict in the essay, it wasn't really quite there. So then we have to revise and think about new topics. Same thing with the supplements. When you're considering writing supplements for schools, sometimes, right, what a lot of students do is reuse essays, but what they do when they do that is they don't really answer the question or the tone of the new essay. And so you don't want to come across as being tone deaf. And we can tell, by the way, in admissions when we read essays and it's a recycled one, because we often write, this looks like it was written for X or some other school. So be careful about that. So that's one of many reasons why to start early. I can give a whole talk just on why you should start early. And then we also say you should seek feedback from either teachers or mentors to improve your writing. I will give a caveat here. So a lot of students end up writing essays in their AP, Lit or Lang or English classes in senior year. And the only caveat I'd say there, not to throw English teachers under the bus, I think they're amazing, but the Common App personal statement is not really like the kind of writing that you would do for an English class. It's not, you're not trying to analyze a poem or a piece of work. You're writing about yourself. So it's really creative nonfiction, which is something that I don't think most AP Lit Lang or English classes are getting into unless it's explicitly for that reason. So be careful about the feedback that you get from teachers or English teachers.
Yes, I cannot second that enough. Like, I feel like you go through all of high school writing a certain way, and then the personal statement is not the way that you've been taught in your Lang classes, because truly is like you're telling a story about your life, about yourself, right? And so you're not even going to follow kind of like that. I feel like we're really taught to have a topic sentence and then like two things that support it and then a closing sentence. That's not going to work super well for your personal statement to get your point across and get your story across to an admissions officer. And so what is really, really important is authenticity, right? What makes you tick? That's what I always ask my students is what gets you excited? It doesn't have to be anything about a class that you took in school or whatever, but maybe there's like a certain, like there was one student that I asked this to, she was applying to a school of engineering, and she was really, she had done a lot of exploration in like the engineering of like skin grafts, which is not something that you get exposed to in high school by any means, but it's something that she, from a project that she did in her science class that then sparked this other interest, and then she started working at a lab and so on and so forth. And all of a sudden I was getting this story from her of where did that interest come from? How did it start? And so it started off with this, kind of fun fact about herself that she was like, interested in exploring this in college, through college level courses. And then I got this whole story about, the first time she ever set foot in a lab and what that meant to her. And then also the fact that, her mom was also a scientist and that meant a lot to her. And she's been a huge influence in her life. And all of a sudden we have this whole personal statement right there. And I think that is really beautiful and exciting. So like, don't shy away from, oh, like, I don't think a personal statement is supposed to be like this, or a personal statement is supposed to show like my interest in this like major. Not necessarily, right? What a personal statement is supposed to show is who you are. Same thing as what Pam said before, if we're sit down for coffee and I was to ask you like, what gets you excited? What gets you out of bed in the morning? That's what I want to know. And same thing with growth and learning, right? Showing your growth and learning from your experience. I think this is the hardest part for students is you almost kind of have to take a step back and look at that experience from like a third person point of view of like, okay, what did I learn from that experience and how did it change me moving forward, or how will it change me when I show up to this institution as a college student next fall? So I think that is one of the bigger, harder things to do, but also really important, bigger steps to make is, okay, I had this experience and this outcome came out of it. And then so what, right? What I'm always looking for when I'm reading a prose statement is like, so what? What's the point, right? Why are you telling me this story? And I want to know, what did it mean to you? And what does that mean for what you're going to do? Because that's how I know that, oh, you learned something from this. Otherwise, it's just like, you know how I feel like from grade school, you're told like show, not tell, right? I think in this case, you do also need to tell. Like, I need you to tell me, hey, what did I learn from this, right? Because otherwise, how am I going to know? Because I've never met you before. I'm reading you from a paper. I need to be able to like get your story from that paper. Audience, right? So keeping in mind your audience, admissions officers want to get to know you. I think that is super, super important to keep in mind, is that these are people that have never met you before. So it's really, really important to include the right details, but also not too many, right? Because you only have 650 words. So I don't need to know every single second of your day from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., but I do need to know that the parts of that day that like got you super excited and why that was important to you. Hopefully that helps.
So perfect. Thank you, Vanna. So we move on to the letters of recommendation. At the top schools, they're actually extremely important. There are some schools where it really doesn't matter at all. I'll use the University of California system as one. They don't officially request letters of recommendation. So you can see how for them, they're reading very differently. However, for, I would say the top colleges, they matter because we can't sit there with you and go to every single class and school that exists out there. So we're asking teachers for the letters of recommendation as a proxy to get to know you. We want to know when you come as a student to our campus, what are you likely to be and how will you show up in the classroom, in our classrooms? So that's what we're asking them for. And I'm saying all of this very explicitly because what ends up happening in bad letters of recommendation that we get are a summary of the student's accomplishments outside of the classroom. So we often get a, oh, so-and-so did this, and they're part of this club, and blah, 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 blah. But the thing is, remember, I have your 10-item activities list, so I don't really need a regurgitation of all that you've done outside of the classroom. What I want to hear from your teachers, and this is where you come in, is examples from where you stood out in class. I need specific anecdotes where you're different and where you're standing out from your peers in the classroom. If you don't have those experiences now and you're a younger student, I would say you have time to build starting now on finding those experiences. But really the best letters are the ones that I've had letters for 5 pages with anecdote after anecdote and not a single adjective about the student. So again, with letters of recommendation, we want them to show, not tell. So a tell means that they're summarizing things about you. Vanna was an excellent student. She often came to office hours. She was very dedicated. She got along well with her peers alike and faculty. But that doesn't tell me anything about her because the majority of letters are going to sound like that. However, if there are very specific details and anecdotes of where Vanna stood out, because she will, and she does, then we will want to know about them. And then I would say you want to ask for these letters well in advance. So a lot of times by the fall, students have hit their limit. I mean, teachers have hit their limit on the number of letters that they're willing to write. So imagine your poor teacher having to write 30 or 40 letters. It takes a lot of time. And it takes a lot of time, not just in terms of the writing, but coming up with the specific anecdotes. So you want to ask them ahead of time so that they have a lot of time to write the letters. On our receiving end, we have definitely gotten bad letters where it's clear that the teacher was not happy at having to be asked at the last minute, and they kind of downgraded the student. So, remember that teachers are humans, and so please be respectful about when you ask them.
That is such a good point. I also often tell students, if you can, even if possible, it's always great to like not just ask for a letter, but to actually sit down with them and be like, talk about like what you're looking for in college, like talk about the kind of stuff that's in your personal statement, share that with them so they get to know you on a more personal level before writing this. I think that's always really helpful. That way they also have an understanding of like, okay, like what is she trying to get across, that kind of stuff. I also think it's always helpful, something that I always do, and I've done this in all of my application processes or all the times I've asked for a letter recommendation is, for example, let's say a certain program I'm applying to, on the admissions page, they say that they're looking for, a student that shows consistency, a student that shows, they're a team player, whatever, right? There'll be certain adjectives or competencies that they list there. Include those in your email to that professor or to that teacher that you're requesting a letter from, of like, hey, here are some of the things that like if you could touch upon, right? As it relates to how I was in the class. If you saw that I was being a team player, that's the kind of stuff I would love for you to highlight in this letter. And that is really, really helpful for them because they know like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to write about. So you're really helping them in that letter writing process. And two, they will then be able to actually be a little bit more unique to you and not just write you a generic letter that are writing all the other 40 students that they're writing one for. Just a couple of tips there. So in terms of how to request, right? So you want to choose teachers, counselors, and mentors who know you well. These can also be people from your extracurricular. In terms of choosing wisely, right? So not just people that can speak to your strength and character, that of course, but then also you want to kind of cover different competencies, right? If every letter is saying the same thing, it's not necessarily adding much to your application, right? I always think about every part of the application should be adding another piece to that puzzle, right? And you are kind of like the whole puzzle, and each person should be adding a little bit component to that puzzle, or they should be reaffirming something from your personal statement or your activities, whatever it may be. The same reason why I say, don't reiterate the same exact thing from your activities in your personal statement. There's a reason why you have both. Same thing with the letters of recommendation, you want them to kind of cover different aspects of who you are. And so that can come from, choosing one liberal arts teacher to speak on your behalf, as well as a STEM teacher or whatever it may be. So that way they're kind of covering different facets of your persona. Always remember to follow up with a thank you note. It is so important to appreciate your teachers for all the work that they're doing, and they're taking this out of their extra time, right, to write you a letter. And always remind them of the deadlines. They have so many students that they're working with, so many other deadlines going on in their head. So always, send a gentle reminder, a month before, a couple weeks before, and honestly, it's not the worst thing if one of your teachers runs late to give them a little bit of a if the deadline's really November 1st, maybe you say October 25th. That's totally okay. So really err on the side of caution. Okay.
So to summarize, we're asking that one, you choose wisely in terms of finding the recommenders who will be your strongest advocates. So not the ones that you like the most, but the ones that you think will have the strongest anecdotes about you and be your strongest support. Ask them early. So a lot of times students will say, but I asked, a week ago. A week is not early. I would say months is early. It takes a while as somebody who's written a lot of letters of recommendation, it takes time. It takes me a lot of time to think about it and to frame it in the context of, what I know about the student. And I have to remember, right, all the different anecdotes and then some about the student. So give me time, right? So give them time to write the letters. And then give your recommenders your information. So stuff from the class, or maybe a paper that you wrote or a piece of work that you were really, really proud of, and send them the deadlines. They'll probably know because they've done this before, hopefully. But just remind them that, November 1 is the early deadline, and then January is usually the regular deadline.
Perfect. So now we've gotten to the point of submitting the application. So this is the final step in the process. Part of this means that you need to go through and review every single detail and make sure that everything is accurate and complete. Kind of how Pam said before about kind of letting your essay breathe. Same thing with the Common App. Don't finish it like the night before or the night of. Try and finish it, well in advance, so that way you have a couple of days to look through it, read through it. I always say print it out, go through it with pen and paper and like line by line, and make sure that you're not even missing a comma or a period or a grammatical error or anything like that. It is so easy to miss some of those things because one, you're stressed when you're filling it out, or you're thinking about so many different things. Super important that you go with pen and paper and just start from beginning to end, from your personal information all the way down, because every single part is so important.
So in terms of steps to submitting, like Vanna was saying, I always get my students to print out the PDF print preview before they hit submit, because sometimes when you cut and paste from Google Docs or Word into the Common App, sometimes it does some weird formatting things, like it'll make the essay entirely bold or make the essay entirely italicized, which is kind of strange. So make sure that that's not happening, because when we read it on our ends in the admissions office and the essay is entirely italicized, we're wondering, oh, did you review this before you submitted this? And then, proofreading is the place where I would say that's where you should ask your teachers and other people to weigh in and help you to just make sure that everything looks good. You've dotted all your I's and crossed all your T's and put all the personal information in accurately. Okay, I have lots of stories around paying fees. So because at the last minute, some students, this is not going to be you guys, but some students will be submitting down to the wire. and then they forget that they have to pay before. So you're not going to accidentally submit. Another fear that my students have is, what if I accidentally submit? You can't accidentally submit because they ask you to pay before you do that. So they're running around the house, looking for the parent's credit card, and then we're running late. So make sure that you know that you do have to pay before you hit submit, and you allow yourself time to do that, which is another reason why you shouldn't be doing it at 11:58 for a 11:59 deadline. So then you want to click submit and confirm your submission. Seriously, I've had students say, no, I swear I submitted. And I'm like, where's the confirmation? And they're like, I don't know, I didn't get it, which meant you didn't submit.
Yeah, that is a huge one. The other thing that I also want to emphasize is oftentimes we'll type out like our personal statement, activities, whatever, in a Word document. And then when you copy and paste it over, the formatting gets messed up. So don't not review it because you're like, oh, I literally just proofread it on my Word document. No, proofread it again in the PDF format, print it out, look at it, because you'd be surprised. Like it can totally mess up. Or like, I mean, I know this happened to me once where, I mean, I hadn't submitted it, but I literally had like missed, copying over the last like 3 words of a paragraph or whatever. So you never want that to happen at the last second. That's why it always helps to be early, because you'll catch that when you print it out and look it over. I feel like we have been a broken record about this. Submit early, always, always, always submit early. We don't want last minute issues. And it's also just it's just gonna make it easier on yourself if you submit early, and it also helps to start these things early because you are also, and I think students always forget this, is that you're still going to be in your senior year. You're still going to be taking those AP classes or whatever it is that you're taking in that first semester senior year on top of having to work on your application. So it is always, always, always better to start it earlier. So that way, when school comes around, extracurriculars pick back up, sports, whatever you're doing in the fall, this is not getting thrown to the wayside. And same thing, you don't want your academics to suffer either because you're going to submit like a mid-year report as well. So really, really important to give yourself enough time to work on your essays and to also give enough attention to your academics in the beginning of senior year. Save your confirmations, as we already said. Always keep receipts, right? So save your confirmations, screenshot the final page that says that you've successfully submitted, and always hold on to those.
Okay, so after submitting, a lot of students think that the process is over. It actually isn't. So a lot of times colleges will ask you to set up an account on their particular application portal. So here's where they're going to communicate with you about interview requests and also missing materials. I can't tell you the number of students I've had who do not check these things. I don't know why and what they're doing, but they've missed interview requests because of it. They'll say, oh no, actually I found out that the interviewer reached out to me a week ago and now it's too late. So I always say to create an email address where you're not getting all the College Board or college spam that you're getting, because I've had students say, but I've got literally 2,700 emails in here and I didn't see it. Create a separate account so that you can pay attention to when the timely notifications. So colleges begin to correspond with you pretty actively after you've hit submit. So this is where they're going to say, hey, your transcript. I've had a student whose transcript wasn't actually uploaded, or the wrong transcript got uploaded. That happened too. Or they're missing a teacher letter of recommendation, even though the teacher said they submitted it, but the college didn't get it. And so then their application was pending for a long time. They ended up being deferred because they couldn't read their application in time. So really pay attention to what information and correspondence is coming to you. By the way, they're not going to Snapchat or TikTok you. That's the other thing my students say, I didn't check email. I'm like, start checking email. They're not going to send it any other way. So really, you got to monitor your inbox, because that's where interviewers are going to get in touch as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And all the stuff that we're saying is only going to help you moving forward as well. You're going to need to look at your email all the time. All right, for next steps. So as we mentioned, monitoring application status, right? So that's the beauty of the Common App, is that everything's in one place. So you can track your application progress, and you can also respond to any additional requests from colleges, and interview requests, right? So for some schools, you'll have an alumni interview. They'll be in your hometown in person, or you'll meet with someone and you have to schedule a interview with them in a timely manner. So stay on top of your email. You don't want to miss something and not see it for a couple of weeks, and all of a sudden you're not able to get that interview anymore. Supplemental essays, right? So some colleges require additional essays. You have to be ready to write these and submit these promptly. You can even start pre-writing those ahead of time. Oftentimes from year to year, they preserve a lot of the same prompts. And it always helps, even if you write one for last year's prompts, it always helps to kind of brainstorm, get the gears turning. And yeah, so definitely keep your eye out for the supplemental essays as well.
So lastly, you want to stay really on top of your calendar. This is especially important because in the early round deadlines, you'll be surprised, but a number of schools decide early action deadlines are quite different. Some of them, the majority of them are November 1, but there are some which are November 15th. And then in the case of Georgia Tech, there's this October 15th for in-state, but not out of state. So there are all of these like different complicated sets of deadlines. So I usually, with my students, have a whole calendar where I tell them month by month what I'd like them to be working on and when they need to submit things to me, as well as month by month, the different college deadlines for their particular college list. I work with them and I say, okay, so here's your college list. Here are all the deadlines for your particular colleges. And then we put it into the calendar and other important dates that are coming up. You want to stay in touch with your recommenders and counselors because, like I said, on the admissions end, we often get a lot of missing or incomplete applications, and we can't do anything about it because it means that we think that you're not applying or you've decided to not apply to us. And if that's not the case and you really meant to apply, then you want to stay on top of looking at the portal to see if your recommenders have submitted their application and two, that the college has actually received it. Sometimes schools use My Learning or Squire or Naviance, and for whatever reason, it doesn't port over. So make sure that all of that is complete. So they'll often give you a checklist, like on the college portal, to see what's missing. So keep on top of all of that.
Let me pop back in here. Well, thank you both. We have a ton of questions and I want to be mindful of time. So I'd love to just hop into the questions. Let's get started. Okay, so a few of these I don't think we're necessarily going to be able to answer tonight, but we're going to try our best, ladies. So the first question, should I submit all my AP scores or only the good ones?
Varna, I'll tackle this one. I would say I would love to see, okay, I'll quote a colleague of mine from the Claremont McKenna colleges. They said, once I see it, I can't unsee it. So let's say that you scored a 1. While there may be extenuating circumstances, and if there are, please tell us. But it will be hard not to notice it. And then the other thing that you should know is that, like I said, Yale is allowing a lot of different kinds of standardized tests to be reported. But if you choose APs versus SATs or ACTs, you must submit all of them. So you don't get to cherry pick the good ones and the bad ones. So just things to note.
Fantastic. Okay. If a school super scores but wants to see all scores, are they then truly considering all scores?
So I think from an admissions perspective, we look for trends, right? So that goes for your grades, that goes for when you take multiple standardized exams. So when you're super scoring, it's it's kind of like giving yourself the best shot to say, okay, this is at my best, this is what I scored in each of these sections or overall. It's not that they're not actually super scoring or that they're actually comparing you to all your scores. It's more so just to see like, oh, okay, like how much did they grow from like the first score to the second or second to the third, whatever it may be. So it's not that they aren't considering, I don't know if I'm understanding the question properly, but it's not that they aren't like super scoring, but it's also that they want to see the growth.
Pam, I saw you nod your head. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
I'm just nodding in agreement with Fana.
Okay, so once all the information is in the Common App, do you pick and choose what information goes to each school, or can the colleges you apply to see everything in the Common App?
Everything in the Common App is sent to that school. So everything you put in the Common App will, and all the schools that you select will get the information in the Common App. You can, let's say you have like 6 or 7 or 8, like, letter of recommenders, and you want to like send certain letters of recommendation to certain places, you can do that. But you cannot modify your like personal statement or like activities or whatever that you send to each school. Hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, let's keep moving. To our audience, if by chance you have more questions or you feel that you need more clarification, please definitely let us know, and we will try our best to get to it. I love this question. Someone says, do I have to wait till August 1st to fill out the common application and the essays?
You don't, but the thing to note is that after August 1, they're going to wipe a lot of stuff that's in there. So you may not want to put it in to the Common App. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't work on your essays, but offline. So the things that remain, all the demographics and anything that you put in there will remain. But after August 1, if you put in supplemental essays and things like that, that'll get wiped. So there's no reason to start populating those right now. However, like I said, you should definitely be working your essays now before August 1.
Yeah, essays and activities should be written out.
Okay. Next question. Riley asks, I've heard that my extracurriculars should relate to my future major. What should I do if I love all subjects, i.e. both liberal arts and STEM, and am undecided?
I can start. You don't by any means have to have all of your experiences like tunneled into whatever you think your major going to be, or if you don't know what your major is going to be, that is totally fine. That is actually the whole point of going to college, right? Is to figure out what you actually want to do. You might hear like your fellow peers like, oh, like I know I want to do this and I'm doing this, and maybe they do, but also maybe that's going to change in their freshman year. That happens to a lot of people. People change majors the same way they change clothes. Like it happens very, very quickly. That being said, if you love all your subjects and you have experiences that happen in multiple places or multiple areas or whatever you want to call it, fields, that is awesome. I love a well-rounded applicant. That's what I always try to strive for. With it doesn't matter if you're applying to an engineering school or you're applying to like a specific school of study. It is really, really important to show that you are one, curious, and two, actually able to do a lot of different things. And there is one of the things that we work on, if you were to like have a counselor like us, we would help you work on, okay, even if you have this experience that has nothing to do with this major, there's actually lessons that you gleaned from that will then feed into that future major or that future career.
There's a couple questions in here that I can actually answer, which is nice. Are there any common mistakes or pitfalls that applicants should avoid? I know that our wonderful panelists here can respond to that, but we actually have an entire webinar that we hosted just last month. So I recommend that you hop into our YouTube channel, or actually if you could even send us an email and we'll make sure that we send that out to you. And somebody asked about how they can get access to this recording. Fantastic question. You will receive a recording in your email within a couple of business days from tonight. It just takes some time for our team to put that in there. We have a ton more questions, and I'm so sorry we won't be able to get to everything tonight. Of course, I want to be mindful of time, but we do welcome you to book a free consultation or just send us an email, and we'll make sure that we try and provide you as much information as possible. Let's see. Let's go with one last question. We just had somebody ask, why don't more colleges post their supplemental essay prompts before August 1st?
So there's a couple of things going on. One, I know it may not seem like it sometimes when you read the questions, but we do actually spend a lot of time wordsmithing, thinking about if we word it this way, are we really asking the thing that we want to ask? Because as you know, some college essays are very open-ended. What brings you joy? And you're thinking, what is it that they want to hear from me when they ask me that? Or what soundtrack should we be listening to while we read your application. And you're thinking, oh gosh, what is it that they're looking for here? But they really do spend a lot of time thinking about, all right, so in last year, the years past, and in last year in particular, because of the Supreme Court ruling, how do we reword this so that we are asking and giving room to the applicants to show us all the different ways that they've been engaging with these kinds of issues? So really the answer to the why not until August 1st is they're actively thinking, revising, and trying to figure out, did last year's questions work? If not, what do we want to shift it to? And what's a better way to ask this particular question?
Thank you. So unfortunately, that's all the time we have for tonight's topic, but thank you all for being here tonight. Pamela, Varna, thank you for joining us and sharing all your insights. To our wonderful audience, please keep an eye on your email for a link to schedule your own consultation or reply to asking you questions you may have. With that being said, I hope everyone has a wonderful evening and we'll see you on the next webinar.